Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming. This is a Left Voice sponsored panel called Bigotry is the Enemy of the Working Class. And we're gonna have first Julia Wallace. She's a socialist militant, active in the union local
SEIU 721.
721, and writer for Left Voice. And then we're gonna have Travis. Thanks very much, Travis, for taking part of this panel. He's a graduate worker and delegate for PSCQ.
Okay. So cool, I'm really glad folks were able to come. We do have some stuff here. There's the stuff table. A little bit about us too. For Left Voice, like our perspective is to organize working class people and oppressed people. In our view, class oppression and oppression based on gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, age, things like that, that those things are interrelated. They're not separate categories to be, to be struggled with separately. They have to be struggled with simultaneously because bigotry is a product of capitalism. Even bigotry predates it, capitalism benefits off of the divisions of the working class. We'll talk about that a little bit more. So like what was kind of the idea of this bigotry as the enemy of the working class is also that bigotry is also not just morally reprehensible, and of course now in the age of Trump, a lot of bigots are feeling more emboldened. But bigotry is also a class question. It's a political question. It's not just to be, it's nice to people just to be nice to them, but that also like we should take a stand against bigotry as a political question. So I was going to talk about a little bit about like the ways in various forms of bigotry and kind of like their class basis, why it's beneficial for capitalists to maintain and continue those forms of bigotry, and also like ways in which people can and have opposed bigotry. So like why does capitalism need bigotry? Well, like here's one obvious point. Everyone can't be a billionaire. Not everybody, even a majority of people in this world can't be uber rich. In fact, only a small group of people can be in order for the system to be maintained. The vast majority of us have to live in very impoverished conditions, which the entire world still does, even in the face of this immense amount of wealth that exists around a small amount. How are they able to maintain that? Well, one of the ways in which that we're going to talk about is having divisions, having groups of people, even among the working class, be inculcated and believe some of these ideas in order to maintain these divisions and not have class solidarity. One example with the Trump administration, a lot of people supported Trump, white people to be more specific, because they thought that he was going to build a wall between the United States and Mexico. And they wanted a wall between the United States and Mexico, in part because many of them believe that Mexican immigrant workers are taking their jobs and are responsible for their lower standard of wages, among other cultural things like wanting to keep the United States white, which is weird because the United States was part of Mexico before it was part of the US. But in any case, wanting to do that. So that's and the capitalists kind of benefiting from that. And from Trump's election, which was in many ways based on just absolute bigotry, they've been able to pass through massive tax cuts, tax breaks for the wealthiest people in this country, and at the same time attack social services for the most impoverished, oppressed people, and have raids and detentions and other things that have made the working class's life more difficult. So it's a specific example of the capitalist class having a propaganda campaign based on this election to use racism to maintain, to end solidarity, especially in the face of a huge immigrant rights movement, in order to benefit directly the wealthiest people. And the poorest white people, well, many of them are realizing what happened and are, especially with the healthcare protests and town halls, are realizing that these people are just wealthy people that use their bigotry in order to get elected. So that's one way in way that racism and xenophobia have been used as bigotry to keep the working class divided for the direct benefit of the capitalist class. Sexism, similarly, having women or female-identified folks doing unpaid labor, being paid less than men, that rigid gender divide has been to the benefit of the capitalist class because it's been able to use that unpaid work and divisions within gender, rigid gender rules in order to maintain class oppression. Women in a lower position, lower paid, and even jobs where women are the majority of the workforce doing a lot of unpaid labor. So if you think about teachers, if you think about nurses, if you think about social workers, jobs that are majority women, a lot of those jobs rely on those workers to be staying after and being unpaid, paying for their own supplies, doing these different things that are not paid because generally in society, women are expected to do unpaid labor. And that's also related to heterosexism and anti-trans bigotry. Because again, having these rigid gender roles, also in alliance with the state, also allows capitalists to have another scapegoat of people. This increase in bigotry has directly affected trans people, particularly trans people of color. And that's also another scapegoat. The femicides that have been happening across the world that happen also in the United States. I don't even think there's a lot of data that's recorded officially about the murder of women. But these things have been happening, again, as scapegoats within counting on the working class within itself to inculcate these kind of bigoted ideas. But in reality, even though there are privileges among the working class, these all really benefit the largest privileges of the capitalist class, who actually are the ones that are in control or controlling the economy. And the last one I wanted to specifically talk about is ableism, which has more recently been discussed politically. So in the society that we live in, your abilities to be productive, to keep this system maintained, are kind of how people are measured in their worth. So your career, what you could do, how much money you make, and people who have limited disabilities are oftentimes relegated and considered unimportant, not discussed, not engaged politically. And even the left, in a lot of ways, haven't been discussing ways in which disability have been affecting the working class. But if people are not considered productive, they're not the ones that are considered to be valued. And even furthermore, social services that, of course, the capitalist class wants to take away, they want to cut them, they affect people with disabilities in very direct ways. So it's, and even another point, the state. So the police often are murdering people with disabilities. I think they said like half of the police murders, I know in Los Angeles, are done with people with disabilities. So that's like a part of it that really isn't discussed politically, even on the left, but it affects people directly with disabilities, and that's also linked with capitalism. So if they can get away with it, then they are able to kill folks that are oppressed because of their limited ability. So I think that, and even furthermore, capitalism creates disability. So capitalism creates disability, people being hurt on their jobs. Capitalism creates disability by encouraging intra-communal violence, gang wars, so to speak. So in Los Angeles, there were huge gang violence that was encouraged by the state to undermine political movements there. And a lot of people became maimed and disabled because of those things. Again, that's good for the capitalist class because those gang wars have been to undermine the political organizing that happened in the Black community in the 70s and 60s. Wars and imperialism maimed people worldwide. Mental disability, depression, PTSD, a lot of those are also created by capitalism. So on the one hand, capitalism doesn't value your disability, and on the other hand, it makes people disabled. So then, what should we do? Now, talked about like disability, talked about bigotry and capitalism. It's important that we organize against capitalism and the various ways that people are oppressed simultaneously. It isn't it's in our interests as political people, as socialists and as revolutionaries, to really understand the ways in which capitalism oppresses us to the best of our ability. Because the more we understand how capitalism is oppressing us in all these different ways, the better ways in which we're able to fight against it. So it's not a race versus class or a bigotry versus class. That's a false dichotomy. What it is that capitalism oppresses us because of racism, because of sexism, and heterosexism, and cissexism, and ableism. It oppresses us in all these different ways, and it behooves us to figure out the ways in which people are oppressed. How do we use that to fight against this system? The other perspective is that the working class is made up of oppressed people. The working class is female, the working class is immigrant, the working class is trans, the working class has different abilities. So we want to organize the working class because they're the strongest, most capable group of opposing capitalism because of our economic relationship. So why is there then considered a disconnect between racism, race and class, to use that kind of dichotomy that's used a lot? I think in a lot of ways, the socialist movements that have been people of color in the United States have been targeted by the government and decimated, murdered, institutionalized, some of them driven to being mentally disabled beyond being able to organize. And the folks that were able to kind of maintain this socialist idea, a lot of them were white and in the colleges and universities. And a lot of the folks that were the political revolutionaries, the Brown Berets, Black Panthers, Asian American hardcore, different groups like that existed in the United States, those were specifically targeted. So socialism, and I'm not saying folks here think that necessarily, but a lot of times folks kind of posit, well, socialism is white. That's a white perspective. That's a white ideology. But if we actually do, understanding of study, there's a historical reason why that has been taken away from many of the working class. McCarthyism kicked a lot of the socialists out of the unions. It kicked a lot of the socialists out of the tenant organizing where they had traditionally been. And at the same time, as I said, the 60s and 70s, a lot of the socialist groups like Drum, different groups like that were targeted. And so now we're in this other position. And if you look internationally, Burkina Faso, in different countries around the world, in Latin America, Africa, Asia, different continents, there have been the socialist movements have been vindicated by people of color. So really what it is that there's been intentionally historical things that have tried to separate groups of oppressed people and the socialist movement. And with us, with Left Voice, our intention is to revive that, revindicate that we are, as oppressed people, in a particular position, especially in this imperialist country, to fight against bigotry and to fight against capitalism simultaneously. And it's really the historic task of our time, and it's something that I believe that we're able to do. And so then I just want to start to wrap up, then how can we fight against bigotry? There's the individual kind of fighting against bigotry, microaggression, things like that, privilege politics, yeah, that's all true and it's all valid. There's so many different kinds of ways that we face oppression and bigotry on a daily basis. But if our only perspective is to fight it in an individual way, then we're really missing out on the larger structural issue of racism, of bigotry. If we have to kind of combat both of those within our organizations, with our communities, and with our workplaces. And furthermore, we need to build confidence in organizing and specifically fighting against bigotry and talking with our coworkers at our workplaces. So many of us don't have experience with politically discussing with each other at our workplaces. That's been, again, intentionally disconnected. But we need to relearn those things and relearn them with a sense of humility, that we can do it, people make mistakes, but that we have to learn how to do it. That's a capitalist party. They shouldn't have free reign. They shouldn't go unopposed. So we need to learn how to do that within our workplaces and our communities. And the other last thing I want to say is that we can build confidence. We really are the leaders that we've been waiting for. And the younger generations are looking to us, even if we don't see them. They're looking to many of us to see, well, how do we challenge this capitalist society? They have nothing for us. There's no future that they have for us. So then how do we do that? That we continue to build confidence in ourselves, in our class, and in our groups as oppressed people. That we continue to oppose capitalism and all forms of bigotry together simultaneously, and that actually we have build confidence that we can do things better, that we can create a better world, that we're capable of doing that, and that's the most important crux, I feel, in terms of organizing. So thank you so much. I'll conclude with that, and appreciate y'all listening too.
I was just gonna kind of briefly go over some of like historical issues of solidarity and oppression and the role that bigotry's played in capitalism, kind of going off of what Julia's brought us up with. And then also, I'd like to kind of gear it towards what we discuss about is the things that we've done within our unions, within our workplaces, within our anti-oppression, anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-homophobic work, and how that's related to working class struggles, and also constraints that we face trying to relate that to our working class struggles, trying to bring these issues into our workplaces, I think, is real questions that we need to ask. And just to start with, like, on solidarity, like, how it is that we're all binded together by this bigotry, by this oppression. Just one example, in the state of Georgia, which has passed these really draconian, they claim, anti-immigration laws, but they're clearly racist laws. They're anti-Hispanic, they're very racialized laws, to the point where the migrant workers who harvest the peaches in Georgia are staying away from working there for fear of the police, fear of the oppression and bigotry. So, they're number one, for this very important commodity for the economy is literally rotting on the trees there. And probably one brief guess, what kind of workers do you think that the state of Georgia would be bringing in to harvest these now that they don't have access to hyper-exploitable migrant worker? They're using incarcerated laborers. They're forcing prisoners to do this job for, of course, the much even lower cost than their exploitation and oppression of migrant workers do. And that's just one example why, if you're concerned at all with anti-incarceration, with prison abolition, which in the US, it would be hoped that any human being would be in that kind of work, why you have to inherently be involved in pro-immigrant work as well, why we're all bound together in that same divide and conquer. It's all about how they can exploit and how they can oppress. The reason why those of us on the left do want to center class, not to, again, like, reinforce this false dichotomy of, it's ableism in class or it's gender in class, but there is a centrality of why it is that being workers, why it is the production of profit, that the needs of capitalism are key in all of our struggle, and it's the one system where those who are doing the oppressing always directly benefit from the groups that they're oppressing. So while certainly members of the white working class will get temporary benefits, social benefits, psychological benefits, and so on from racism, that's not an inherent thing. Holding down black workers in the long run always goes against white workers. US history, of course, you look at the worst wages in the country are Jim Crow South, not just for black workers, but the white working class in the Jim Crow South had, because they couldn't unionize, they were completely divided. They worked for less wages than white workers that had less rigid, the less legalistic form of oppression that people would argue the Du Bois psychological wage of whiteness, that you gain this benefit from that, but he's meaning that that's a false benefit. That's not an actual material gain. That's them basically committing, attacking themselves, attacking their own class location for basically buying into the ideology, for doing the ideology of the people who are on the same hand exploiting and oppressing them as workers. And part of the history of that is that the Jim Crow, the black codes, come directly from working class struggles. They come from the populist radical reconstruction movements of the post-Civil War, that the freed black workers and the white workers had both joined together post-Civil War and started movements, realizing it's the landlords, it's the merchants, It's the employers who are benefiting from all that. If we get ourselves in power, if we take the power, then we can get the land, we can get the resources that we need. The number one way they have of crushing that down is instituting this highly racialized code that race is the easy way for capitalists to do things. We can see that purely with Trump, that he can use this white bigotry to code all the actual gains that they want to do. The healthcare bill, I think, is like the prime example that there's nothing inherently racialized about that. That's they want to do one of the largest transfers of wealth from the working class to the wealthy that the US state has ever tried to get away with, and simply because they think they can pull it off due to this racial animus that they've only been able to build in recent years. Another key group that you had alluded to is DRUM, the Detroit Dodge Revolutionary Union movement, and the other RUMs in Detroit come directly out of the 1967 Detroit Rebellion. This is a straight rebellion of decades of de facto segregation. So Detroit, then and now, one of the most segregated cities, fight battles, literal battles over housing constantly. The police used in Detroit in the 1960s are a straight occupation army. They're an occupying force. They're not from Detroit. They're from the outlying suburbs. They're bringing in people who are basically fully attuned with this racial ideology and just attacking the black residents of Detroit at every turn. Detroit fights back. It's one of the costliest and deadliest rebellions of the 1960s. And what emerges out of that is a working class movement that realizes these moral appeals, the getting Lyndon Johnson to sing "We Shall Overcome" while he's giving a speech is not attacking any of these issues. That what they need is a revolutionary working class movement to hit them where it hurts. That's where we see the centrality of class. Is it's not just about these abstract theoretical ideas. It's that if we want to get the things that we need, if we want to stop the police, get the police out of our neighborhoods, stop the police from killing us, they're not gonna listen to us. They're not gonna take it seriously unless you hit them where it hurts. Detroit, 1967, that's gonna be the auto industry. If they can take over the auto workers, if they can build a solidaristic, anti-racist, anti-imperialist, anti-war movement, they can actually get these things moving by not producing the number one thing that's moving the US economy. They can stop Detroit from producing cars. They're actually gonna have a real movement. And again, it's going to be no surprise. It's not just the state that's cracking down on them. Their own union, their own bureaucratic union, also has something to lose by the workers themselves, the rank and file workers, getting the power in their own hands. So they're attacked on those same issues, that when you fight these anti-capitalist, anti-racist issues, they're going to make it seem that you're the racists, that you're the dividers, that you're the ones doing the wrong things. And this is nothing new, that the same rhetoric that we hear now for our own movement for Black Lives work and all of our anti-racist work, and that it distracts from other issues, or you're fighting over primacy, trying to feed us into these oppression Olympics, as we often call it, of what group's the most oppressed. We have to center that, but the group that's most oppressed is all of us. Like, no one is safe, and I think that's one of the key things you brought up, is that unless there's a random capitalist in left forum, I highly doubt that none of us are benefiting from this system, that we're all hit. We might be hit in different ways, to different extents, and have different kinds of constraints against us, but in the end, we're all bound together. That whatever privileges you might have, whether it's from ableism or being cisgendered or whatever privileges that you're currently experiencing, the simple fact that it's the select group, it's the 1%, it's the political and economic elites who decide which groups get to be considered people, which groups get rights as they give them, that they hand these out, that these aren't things that we have, they aren't things that we take, but that they're given to us, and then they remind us constantly that they can also be taken away at another moment. And I think, again, just with the current events, when you look at the last election, you see a lot of this liberal media already blaming voters of color, that we get Trump because voters of color didn't turn out to the election and we didn't vote, because we know that's how That's how we've gotten all the great things in this country is through voting. And again, the question they'll never ask is why? Why would voters of color not want to turn out for Hillary Clinton? It's not going to be addressed by any of these analyses of the election. That the simple fact that while one section of the working class is duped to vote for Republicans and Democrats, we have to remember the winner of the 2016 election was none of the above. The majority of eligible voters in this country chose none of the candidates. That nothing in our electoral system they see offers them anything that's going to change their daily lives. Interview, I think it was on Democracy Now!, someone talking from Flint, Michigan, saying that we here in Flint don't give a crap about Jared Kushner or Russia. We could care less what's going on in Russia. We want water that we can drink. That's another how these things intersect. It's not, Flint isn't destroyed because they're black residents. It's a majority black city. It's not that their intent, they're gaining just from destroying black lives. They're gaining from the massive amounts of profit that they took from the people of Flint, the people of Michigan. Again, massive transfers of wealth, of resources from the poor and working class to private industry, to a few the 1%, that tiny minority who actually gains from these things. That's what they're getting from that. The reason they can get away with it is because race always intersects with class. Flint is a majority black city, so they feel that they can get away with things they couldn't get away with in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, or something like that. Obviously, that they can use these divisions and know that they've been successful. And so I think it is key that we take not just these defensive approaches to protesting when we get attacked and saying that this is wrong when police kill our trans brothers and sisters and non-conforming and so on, and when these deportations and raids and so forth happen, as much as we do need to get together and fight in defense of these things. But like you're saying, we have to take the proactive approach. We have to talk to our coworkers, find out why. We probably all work with people who vote for Trump, who are saying that yes, build this wall, they want to build the wall. We have to talk to them and find out, ask them questions, give them the things that we've experienced, and make it a real conversation, not just shutting it down that, oh, you did this, you're this-ist, you're racist, ableist, sexist, so on and so forth. But again, explaining that these things can be overcome, they have been overcome, and that we're all in this together, that what actually binds us in oppression is way more important than what tears us apart in that. And again, it's not that these things are impossible. We're talking post-Civil War, interracial general strikes in the New Orleans docks, that sharecroppers coming together, starting a sharecroppers union, white and black, that face, again, huge state repression. That's why they don't last, because they're that dangerous. We talk about the crackdown in the 60s and 70s. Black Panther's why Fred Hampton gets assassinated, literally assassinated by the state, is because he's working with the Appalachian white workers, with the Young Lords. He's building something that's actually threatening to them through the Rainbow Coalition in Chicago, that they know these are the dangerous moments, that any of these divisive kind of anti-oppression things will only go to their benefit in the long run. It's us coming together that has the potential, and that we do have the leverage still, even just where we're at, to again shut the shit down that they depend on, that they benefit from. That what they really benefit from is these profits, is from always trying to pay workers the least amount they can do. And a long time ago they realized that all these divisions is a prime way of doing that certain jobs are women's jobs, black people's jobs, migrant jobs, so on and so forth, that all it boils down to is certain jobs will always try to pay less, always threatening each other, always that competition that you started talking about, that they want this wall because they think they get paid little because of migrant workers. They're not realizing they're getting paid so little because while our wages have stagnated and declined in a lot of places, we're seeing record profits. People are making record amounts of wealth and income simply due to their side getting the balance in this class struggle that we're currently in. So I think a key part, and one thing that will bind people together, is how how your life lived experiences class is often through race. It is through, you look at your neighborhood, most of your neighborhood looks exactly like you, and they're in that same the same constraints, the same issues that you're dealing with. But again, the enemy isn't the other worker who might get something slightly better than you or something slightly worse, but the enemy is the one who is attacking all of us as workers and all of us as the poor, that they're actually benefiting from that. So I think I'll just wrap it up there, and thank you guys, and yeah, hopefully we can get a good talk going on.